My name is Harvey Driscoll. I'm 57 years old, and I funded a family that had already written me out before I knew the pen was moving. It was Canadian Thanksgiving, the second Monday of October, the kind of afternoon that smells like wood smoke and wet leaves, and I was sitting alone at my kitchen table in Innisfil with a bowl of soup I hadn't made any real effort on when I opened Facebook. I only have the app because my granddaughter Emma was in a spring dance recital, and my daughter had posted a video I didn't want to miss. The photo loaded while I was watching the steam come off the bowl. Long farmhouse table at the Pemberton's place, out on the 5th concession, autumn centerpiece, the good cloth napkins, candles. My daughter Shannon on one side, her husband Darren on the other, both kids between them, Emma in the blue dress with the smocking, Jack with his hair actually combed, and at the head of the table, in the seat where you put the person everyone's celebrating, was Darren's father Dwight, and propped in front of his plate was a card, hand-decorated in crayon, that said Best Grandpa. The caption was, "Grateful for the family we've built." I counted the people in the photo, 7. Then I counted the chairs, which took a minute because one was pushed back and half out of frame. 7 chairs, 7 people, not a gap anywhere. I'd been waiting for a call all day. Shannon knew I didn't have plans. I'd mentioned twice in September that I'd be around for the long weekend. I'd bought a butternut squash at the farm stand on the highway and a good bottle of Niagara Red. Both were still on the counter behind me. I put the phone face down on the table. Then I picked it up again and looked at Emma's dress. I'd been with Shannon when she bought that dress. June at the outlet mall in Barrie. Emma had spun in the changing room and said it made her look like a cupcake. And Shannon had laughed the way she used to laugh before everything got complicated. I carried the bags to the car. I drove them home. The dress had been hanging in Emma's closet for months, and I'd been thinking about it, looking forward to wherever the occasion turned out to be. 7 chairs, not 6 with a gap. 7 counted before anyone sat down. I didn't comment on the photo. I didn't call. What I did was open my banking app for the first time in 3 weeks and look at something I almost never look at, because there's no reason to check something that runs on its own. Scheduled transfers, 4 of them. $100 a month to an account in Shannon and Darren's names. Memo line, Cascade Catering, Equipment Fund. That was her business. She'd started it 2 years after Marion died, and she'd cried on the phone from their driveway saying she didn't know if she could make it work. I set the transfer up that same night. $580 a month toward their mortgage. They'd refinanced in 2022, when rates climbed and the payment jumped nearly $700. I covered most of the shortfall. Darren never mentioned it. Shannon said thank you once, and then we didn't talk about it again. $320 a month on my auto insurance. Darren had an at-fault accident 2 winters ago, and his rates went somewhere. He said he couldn't manage. I added him to my commercial policy as a secondary driver. My broker told me it wasn't unusual for family. And $900 a month into an RESP, a registered education savings plan, for Emma and Jack. I'd opened it the week Emma turned 4. The government matches a portion through the Canada Education Savings Grant, so the money compounds faster than a regular savings account. I never told Shannon or Darren the full balance. I just kept putting the money in, first of every month, the way you service a vehicle you intend to keep running. I did the math on the back of an old invoice from the truck. I didn't need to. I already knew. $2,900 every month. Some of those had been running 2 years, the rest nearly 4. I sat there at the kitchen table with the butternut squash on the counter and thought about Marion. She would have called Shannon that morning. She would have known exactly what to bring, what time to show up, which kid needed which thing. She kept all of it in her head and made it look effortless, and I never understood until she was gone how much of what I thought was family had actually been her, moving quietly behind it. 3.5 years since the funeral, and I still hadn't figured out what to do with Thanksgiving. I put the phone face down. Then I picked it up a second time and pressed my thumb against the banking icon. I sat there with the screen open for a long while, not angry. Anger is what you feel when you still think there's been a mistake. This didn't feel like a mistake. 7 chairs, counted before dinner. I closed the app without pressing anything. I needed to know one more thing first. The next Saturday, I drove over to Shannon and Darren's place on the south end of town with a bag of Halloween stuff for the kids. The good chocolate, not the bulk variety. I'd texted ahead. Shannon sent back a thumbs up. When I got there, Darren's truck was gone. Shannon said she had a booking to confirm, and could I let myself in? The kids were in the living room. Their front hallway is long and narrow, with picture frames going the full length on the left wall. Shannon had arranged them herself during a weekend 2 springs ago when she was on a decorating kick. I helped her level them. I have the pencil measurements on a notepad in the truck to prove it. I stopped in the middle of that hallway. The photo from our trip to Niagara Falls was gone. The one of Marion and Shannon and me squinting into the sun on the observation deck, all 3 of us in raincoats because the mist gets everywhere, and Marion had looked it up ahead of time. In its place was a picture of Dwight and Gloria at what looked like someone's cottage. A wooden dock, 2 Muskoka chairs, the particular orange of a sunset over a bay. The one of me holding Emma at the hospital, brand new pink 7 pounds 14 ounces, was gone too. A framed drawing by Jack was in its place. A house with a sun, nice drawing. 3 frames with Dwight in them that I didn't recognize. Dwight at a Christmas tree, Dwight in a canoe with Jack, Dwight and Emma at what might have been the county fair. I counted the total frames, 16. I counted the ones with me in them. 0. I stood in that hallway with my bag of Halloween chocolate, and then Emma came running around the corner in her socks and slid the last few feet the way she always does, and grabbed my arm and said, "Grandpa Harv," with her whole face, and that part was fine. I crouched down and hugged her. Then Jack came around the same corner, slower, 5 years old and very deliberate about doorways. He looked at me with that serious expression he gets when he's reporting something. "Mum says you're not our grandpa," he said. "No meanness in it anywhere. Just information. She says Grandpa's Grandpa Dwight. She says you're Grandpa Harv." I stayed crouched. My knees don't love it, but I stayed. "When did she say that?" He shrugged. "At school pickup. Because Emma said something wrong." Emma was already into the chocolate. She didn't look up. I put my hand on Jack's shoulder. "You can call me whatever feels true to you," I said. "But I want you to know who I am." He nodded like I'd said something reasonable, and went to find his sister. I sat on the bench by the door with my hands on my knees for a minute. Shannon came into the hallway from the kitchen, saw the bag Emma had already opened, and smiled. "You didn't have to," she said. I almost said it then. I had the hallway right there, the empty frames, Jack's words still in the air. Instead, I said I'd see her soon, and I drove home. That night I went to my brother Stan's place. Stan's older than me by 6 years. He retired from the mill and now restores old snowmobiles in his garage, which his wife says is a hobby and he says is a calling. He poured coffee neither of us drank, and I told him about the Thanksgiving photo. I told it flat, the way I'd describe a bad job estimate to a client. He didn't say "Oh Harvey" or reach across the table. Stan's not built for that. "You weren't forgotten," he said. "You were already gone and they just hadn't told you yet." I started to say that was a big assumption. He got up and came back with a folded piece of newsprint and put it in front of me. It was from the county paper. Darren Pemberton, Ward 3 Town Council candidate. Family photo on the Pembertons' back porch. Shannon, Darren, both kids, Dwight with his hand on Jack's head, Gloria beside him. Everybody smiling at whoever was behind the camera. Taken last spring. Emma was in the green cardigan she'd worn to her spring concert, the one I'd sat in the 3rd row for. "How long has this been running?" I asked. "Since August," Stan said. "It's been on the bulletin board at the arena since August, Harvey." I looked at Gloria's smile in the photograph. Then I looked at where my daughter was standing and thought about how long she'd known. "So if this was settled in August," I said slowly, "the Thanksgiving table wasn't the decision." "No," Stan said. "The Thanksgiving table was the announcement." I drove home with my hands at 10 and 2 and thought about one thing. If Shannon had quietly finished replacing me by August, why were my transfers still clearing on the 1st of every month? There's a man named Lionel Foss who does my books. He's 63, spent 20 years in commercial lending at TD before he went independent. He charges me in lake trout and takes on 5 clients he actually trusts. On a Thursday evening, he spread my last 3 years of personal draws across the counter at the shop and looked at me over his reading glasses. "Harvey, do you know what you've moved out of this account since Marion passed?" "I know what I move every month." "That's not the same question." He turned the page around. He'd circled a total in red pen and underlined it twice. $118,000, and that was before the rest. I kept looking out the window at the parking lot. Your RRSP contributions are running 3 years behind where they should be, he said. You pushed back twice. I knew. Once when the mortgage shortfall started, once when the catering business needed the monthly fund. I hadn't told anyone. Marion was gone by then, and there was no one to tell. Lionel took his glasses off. What are you going to do? I told him I wasn't sure yet. That was a half-truth, and I think he knew it. But he let me keep it. He's good at that. Gives people room to arrive at where they're already going. Here's what I want to be clear about, because I've had months to sit with it. I don't regret a dollar of it. Not one. I'd write every check twice. I just needed to understand what I'd paid for. And I needed to know whether my daughter had anything to say before I changed things. I gave her the chance. I want that on the record. I called Shannon on a Saturday evening. She answered on the third ring. Restaurant noise behind her. A hostess stand maybe, people laughing. Dad, hey, everything okay? I didn't mention the photo, I didn't mention Thanksgiving, I didn't mention Jack in the hallway. I was thinking I'd come by Sunday, I said. Have dinner with you and the kids. A pause, long enough to mean something. This weekend's actually pretty tight, she said. Darren's got stuff with the campaign, and it'd just be you and the kids, Dad. You don't really love those big, chaotic dinners. I switched the phone to my other ear. Shannon, what does Jack call me? The restaurant noise kept going. 4 seconds of it. A glass landing on a hard surface somewhere. Don't make that into a thing, Dad. I'm dealing with a lot right now, you have no idea. I'm asking a question. I have to go, they're getting our table. She hung up first. I stood in my kitchen with the phone, still against my ear, after the call was already over. She hadn't asked what I meant. She hadn't said, what does he call you, or what are you talking about, or since when. She said, don't make it into a thing. You only say that to a question you already know the answer to. My daughter had known for months. She'd sat across from me at Jack's swim meet in May, and known. She'd let me drive 40 minutes in November slush to drop off Christmas stuff, and she'd known. I sat down at the kitchen counter, then I opened the banking app, and this time I didn't stop. Transfer 1, Cascade Catering, Equipment Fund, $100. The app asked if I was sure. I pressed confirm. Transfer 2, Mortgage Shortfall, $508, confirm. Transfer 3 I couldn't do from the app. Monday morning I called my broker and asked her to remove Darren as a secondary driver on my commercial policy. She asked if I wanted it effective immediately or at renewal. I said immediately. She said she'd send written confirmation to both addresses on file. I told her please do. Transfer 4 I did not cancel. I want to be careful here because this is the part people get wrong about what I did. That money was for Emma and Jack. It was never for their parents. So on Tuesday I drove to a credit union in Barrie and I moved the recep into an account with me as the sole subscriber. Same kids, same beneficiaries, same monthly deposit, different lock on the door. Then I sat in the credit union parking lot and wrote my daughter a letter on a legal pad. 4 sentences. I mailed it because a letter can't be deleted while you're sitting at a red light. I told her the catering fund, the mortgage support, and the insurance had all ended. I told her the respite was safe and growing, and that she could call the credit union anytime she wanted and they'd confirm everything. She didn't need my permission for that. And I told her this, I'm still your children's grandfather. I'm just not your household budget anymore. The letter arrived Wednesday. Nobody called for 19 days. People ask what those weeks were like. The honest answer is that I felt lighter than I had in 3 years. And the lightness made me feel like something was wrong with me. I took a job I'd been putting off, a full commercial replumb on a new build north of Alcona. 3 weeks of cold mornings and long days and both hands busy. I rebuilt the back deck stairs that had been soft since the summer. I cooked real meals. One night I made Marion's chicken soup from memory and got it about 80% right. Stan dragged me out to a spot on Lake Simcoe on a Saturday, and we sat in the boat for 3 hours and didn't catch a thing, and it was the best afternoon I'd had in a long time. Every night around 9 I checked my phone. Nothing. I told myself that was information, not injury. Day 17, I made the mistake of opening Facebook. Shannon had posted a reel. She was standing in a new commercial kitchen space. Stainless steel everywhere, double the size of the one she'd been renting. Big things on the horizon for Cascade Catering. Voice bright, face bright. She'd signed a new lease. In the month after my transfers stopped, She had committed to a bigger space at a bigger rent. The first of the month was 8 days out. I went to work the next morning like nothing had changed. I was lying under a vanity cabinet on the job site at 10 o'clock when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. Dad, I think there was a banking error. The transfer didn't come through. I read it twice, put the phone back in my pocket, and finished the connection. Missed call at 11, another at 11:40. At 12:30, a text from Darren. 3 paragraphs. He used the word miscommunication twice and signed it with just his initial, like a man sending a work memo. I called them at 6:30, after I'd washed up. Shannon answered before the second ring finished. Dad, thank God, so the bank. There's no banking error, I said. I canceled them. I'm allowed to cancel them. The sound she made. I've heard Shannon cry the real kind exactly twice. This was the real kind. Dad, I have a lease. I signed a lease on a commercial kitchen. I know. You didn't even tell me. I mailed you a letter 3 weeks ago. Then Darren's voice came on close, like he was right beside the speaker, completely steady. Harvey, hey, let's all take a breath. I hear you, we hear you. A pause. Then, in exactly the tone a man uses when he's closing a deal, how long are you planning to keep this up? Not why. Not what did we do. How long are you planning to keep this up? He thought I was a negotiating position. He thought I was having a bad month that would pass. Then he said the worst thing he could have said. You're punishing 2 little kids because you didn't make the Thanksgiving list. I let that sit on the line for a good 4 seconds. Let him hear it back. Darren, I said, get a pen. I heard a drawer open. The kids' education money hasn't stopped. It never stopped. It's in an RESC at the credit union in Barrie. Both of them are named on it. I'm still putting in $900 a month, and the government is matching a portion on top of that. Balance as of last Friday was $43,200. Silence. You can't manage that account on your own. It's my money. I opened it. My name is on it. You have never put a single dollar into it. That's not. In 2023, you and Shannon withdrew $4,800 from the old joint savings account I was contributing to. You told me it was for Shannon's equipment. I saw the transaction. It went out the same week you bought the snowmobile. I didn't say I'd never mentioned it at the time. That silence had been my own choice, and I owned it. Shannon got back on the line. She was crying the real way now. Dad, please, this is my business. Shannon, I said, I'm not doing anything to your business. I stopped being your operating budget. Those are 2 different things. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen with my hands shaking, and I want to be honest with you about that. Doing the right thing did not feel good. It just felt done. Gloria Pemberton called me on a Tuesday. First time in 11 years. I knew the number because Marion had saved it, and it had transferred through 3 phones. She didn't mention money, not once the whole call. I'll give her that. She talked about how these things move through every family, about how what matters is that the children see the adults modeling grace. She used the word maturity. She used the phrase rising above. Then, because she is very skilled at this, she added, and you and Dwight are really the ones who remember what it was like before all this got so complicated, aren't you? Then she got to the point. We're hosting our anniversary dinner on the 29th at Harvest Hall. 30th. I do so hope you'll be there, Harvey. You're such an important part of this family. Part of this family, said warmly, the way people say things they've rehearsed. I'd be glad to come, I said. I understood exactly what that invitation was. She hadn't called to make peace. She'd called because in 3 weeks, to be 40 people in a room, and a man who won't answer his phone will answer a question in public. She was setting a table again. She just didn't know I had my own reason to sit at it. On the 9th of November, Darren got pulled over on the county road for a burned-out taillight. He handed over his license and his pink slip. The card looked current. The policy behind it was not. I'd had him removed from my coverage 6 weeks earlier, and he'd been driving for 6 weeks on a piece of plastic that no longer meant anything. In Ontario, operating a motor vehicle without valid insurance under the Highway Traffic Act carries a minimum fine of $5,000 for a first offense, up to $25,000, license suspension, demerit points, and if you happen to be a man currently running for Ward 3 Town Councillor, on a platform of community responsibility and fiscal accountability, There's also the particular problem of public records. Shannon texted me at 11 that night. 3 paragraphs. The line I remember: "You are destroying my entire life because you didn't get a phone call on Thanksgiving." I typed 3 different replies and deleted all 3. What I sent was: "My broker mailed Darren a cancellation notice on October 24th. Check the mail by the front door." She answered the next morning. 2 words: "He didn't." I've thought about that a lot. Whether he didn't open it, or whether it sat under campaign flyers and hockey schedules for a month because nobody in that house actually believed the money could ever really stop. I sent one more text and then put the phone down. I'm not destroying anything. I stopped holding it together. That's a different thing. She came to the shop on a Friday afternoon. She was crying before the door finished closing. I got her the good chair from behind the counter and a box of tissues from the bathroom, and I sat on a stool and let her talk for 12 minutes without saying one word. She talked about Gloria running every holiday and every birthday, about a group chat she was on and a group chat she wasn't, about Darren controlling the accounts, asking for receipts on anything over $200, about how tired she was. Some of it was true. I could hear which parts. When she was done, I handed her another tissue. "I've got one question," I said. "Then I'll do whatever you want." She looked up. "Who taught Jack to call me Grandpa Harv instead of Grandpa?" Her face did something I hadn't seen since she was 16. "That doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters. Tell me who, and I'll turn all 3 of them back on tonight. From this phone right now." I set it on the counter between us. You know I don't bluff. The shop compressor kicked on. It runs about 90 seconds. She looked at the phone the whole time. She didn't say Gloria. She could have. It would have been easy and I'd have half believed her. She just didn't say anything at all. And that was how I found out, sitting on a stool in my own shop with my hands on my knees. "Okay," I said. "I gave you a real chance. You just turned it down." She stood to go. At the door she turned back, and what she said was what made me decide to go to that anniversary dinner. "You never tried either, Dad." She had her hand on the doorframe. "You never once asked why you weren't being included. Not one time. Do you know how that looks?" Then she left, and I stood in an empty shop at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. I'd like to tell you I dismissed it. I couldn't, because she wasn't entirely wrong. 8 years of skipped occasions, rearranged dinners, photographs I wasn't in. I never asked about a single one. I told myself every time that asking would make me a burden, and being a burden was the one thing I would never be. Marion used to do the asking. She'd say, "Harvey wants to know when we're doing the holidays," and people would answer, and I'd get to keep my mouth shut and still have a chair. She interpreted for me for 22 years. 3 years without her, and no one was speaking for me at all. So I got out the notebook I keep in my shirt pocket for job estimates and load calculations, and I turned to a clean page and started writing down what I would say if I ever got to say it in front of people who couldn't hang up. I wrote a paragraph and crossed it out, wrote another and crossed that out too. 9 days and I got it down to 4 sentences. 4 is what I could say without my voice going. I know my limits. I've spent 57 years learning exactly where they are. Dwight Pemberton came into the shop on a Wednesday morning with 2 cups of Tim Hortons and no appointment. We'd been in the same rooms maybe 30 times in 11 years. Longest conversation we'd ever had was about the weather at Shannon and Darren's housewarming. He set a cup on my counter and stood there like a man at a job interview. "I need to ask you something, and I'd like an honest answer." "All right. Thanksgiving. Why weren't you there?" I looked at him for a second. I wasn't invited. He didn't move. Then he set his own cup down very carefully on the counter edge. "That's not what I was told." "What were you told?" "That you were busy, that you didn't enjoy that kind of gathering." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Meredith? Shannon said it in the car on the way there, Darren. She mentioned it more than once leading up to it." I pulled out my phone, scrolled up through my messages with my daughter, and turned the screen toward him and let him look. Thanksgiving this year, nothing from her. Thanksgiving last year, nothing. He looked at the screen for a long time without saying anything. "That napkin," he said. "The best grandpa thing. Gloria had it made. She handed it to me at the table. I'd never seen it before in my life. I put it on because 40 people were looking at me and I didn't know what else to do." He sat down on the customer stool. I'll tell you what got me about that moment. He didn't apologize for taking my place. He hadn't taken my place. Someone had handed him a napkin, and he'd put it on because that's what you do when you don't know the full story. I've got 4 grandchildren, he said finally. Not one of them asked to be caught in the middle of any of this. He stood up and dropped his Tim Hortons cup in my waste bin, which for some reason I remember clearly. At the door he turned around. Come to the party, he said. Sit down, I'll handle where people sit. He left, and I stood in the shop for a while after. Harvest Hall was a converted dairy barn on the county road, the kind that gets rented for anniversaries and agricultural fundraisers. 30th anniversary dinner, 40-some guests, pine tables down the center under Edison bulbs, the smell of cedar and catered food. I ironed a shirt I hadn't worn since Marion's cousin's retirement party 4 years ago. She'd picked it out at an outlet in Barrie and said the collar sat right. I wore it anyway. Stan sat in my kitchen while I did it. Don't go, he said. I'm going. Harvey, 40 people, and every one of them has known Gloria for 30 years. She'll have that whole room warmed up before you find the coat rack. That's the only reason to go, I said. I hung the shirt on the doorframe. It's the one room in the world where they can't hang up on me. He thought about that for a while. Then he said he'd be in the parking lot in his truck if I needed a reason to leave, and that I should look at him and he'd start yawning. At 7 o'clock, I walked through the front doors of Harvest Hall. Long tables down the center under those hanging bulbs, side tables around the edges, 40-some people already finding their seats. Dwight was across the room when I came in. He crossed to me in about 8 steps, shook my hand in front of everybody, held it a beat longer than a handshake needs. Harvey, good, you're up here with me. He walked me the full length of the center table. I could feel the room adjust. 40 people, doing the arithmetic at the same time and arriving at different answers. The seat was center left, directly beside his own chair. Gloria was at the head of the table with a laminated seating chart in her hand. I watched her look down at it, look up at me, look at her husband. She put the chart face down on the tablecloth and said nothing. Darren was by the bar with 2 men in fleece vests, the kind of men who write checks to municipal campaigns. He hadn't seen me yet, Shannon had. She was by the windows and she'd gone very still. Then Emma came through somebody's elbow at a dead run. Grandpa Harv, how come you get the good seat? The nearest 8 or 9 people heard it. I felt the small wince travel around the table. Dwight answered before I could, without lowering his voice. Because that's your grandfather's seat, Emma. She looked between us. Your grandpa Dwight, she said. I know, I'm your grandpa on your dad's side. He's your grandpa on your mom's side. You've got 2. He put his hand on the back of my chair. That's lucky. Most kids only get 1. Emma considered this for about 3 seconds, said okay, and went to find the bread rolls. Gloria stood up with the microphone 11 minutes early. She was very good. She talked about how she and Dwight met at a Canada Day parade in 1994, about building a life in this county, about what 30 years teaches you. People laughed in the right places. Then she found her corner. 30 years teaches you that real family isn't paperwork, she said. It isn't obligation. Real generosity is the kind that comes freely, the kind that doesn't come attached to conditions. Her eyes were on the centerpiece, but her chin was pointed about 15 degrees toward the center left of the table. Then Darren stood up with his glass, and a smile and 2 drinks in him. To 30 years, he said, and to family, because family isn't about finances. He let it settle. It's about who's actually in the room. There was a polite laugh, maybe 15 people. It went around the table, and then it hit a stretch where nobody laughed at all, and it just stopped there. Shannon was looking at her plate. Stan, 4 seats down, set his fork on the tablecloth without a sound and looked straight at me. And what I felt in that moment, I've had months to sort through it, wasn't anger. It was relief. Because Darren had just said it out loud in front of 40 people, 2 campaign donors, the president of the local Rotary Club, and the principal at Emma's school. He had found the one subject he couldn't afford to have opened and put it on the table himself. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. I stood up. Darren, I said, can I borrow the microphone a second? And in front of 40 guests, his mother could not say no. The microphone gave a short squeal when it changed hands. I didn't take anything out of my pocket. I'd been over it enough times. My name is Harvey Driscoll, my voice held. I'm Shannon's dad. I'm Emma and Jack's grandfather. The room went quiet in that particular way a room does when it knows something is about to be said that can't be unsaid. Darren's right. Family is who shows up. I turned just slightly, so I wasn't talking directly at him. I've been showing up for 4 years. A chair creaked at the far end. Nobody else moved. For those 4 years, I covered the shortfall on their mortgage payment. I funded Shannon's catering business every month. I carried Darren on my commercial insurance policy. And I opened a registered education savings plan for both grandchildren that I've been contributing to since Emma was 4 years old. I didn't say the dollar amounts. I had the total in Lionel's handwriting in my shirt pocket. I left it there. Last month I stopped 3 of those. The 4th one is still running. That one is for the kids, not the adults. I turned toward Dwight. I wasn't at the Thanksgiving table. I didn't come here to make anyone answer for that in public. I set my other hand on the back of my chair. I don't need a thank you. I needed a chair. Dwight gave me one tonight. I looked at him. Thank you, Dwight. I set the microphone down on the tablecloth. I sat. 4 seconds. I counted them, because counting is what I do when I'm keeping myself level. Then a man at the far end of the table, I found out later he was the Rotary Club president, started clapping. Then the woman across from me. Then the whole side table by the windows. Then most of the room. It wasn't wild. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was something quieter and worse for some of them. It was the sound of 40 people making up their minds about something at the same time. Gloria did not clap. She looked at the seating chart face down beside her plate. Darren went out the side door by the kitchen. Shannon stayed in her chair with her hands in her lap. I left before dessert. I said what I came to say, and I'm not built for the part that comes after. She caught me in the parking lot. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. No tears. That's how I knew we were finally having the real conversation. I said my name and I said what was true. I said, if the true part is humiliating, Shannon, that's not something I did. She stood in the October cold with her arms wrapped around herself. I was the one who told Jack. She said it to the pavement. When Gloria kept correcting Emma at dinners, in front of people, Emma would look at me, and it was easier to get ahead of it than to fight about it every single Sunday. I know. You don't know what it's like in that family, Dad. Then tell me. And she did. Some of it. About the group chats she was on and the ones she wasn't. About having to ask permission for any expense over $200. About a night last spring when Darren told her that if she couldn't get fully on board with how his family operated, they should evaluate the arrangement. He'd mentioned his cousin in Kitchener, who practices family law. She was 24 when she married him. I walked her up the aisle at St. Andrew's in the rain and thought he seemed like a serious young man who would take care of her. Dad, are we going to be okay? I looked at her for a long time. Not yet, I said, but we're starting from a real place. We've never actually done that before. I reached into the car and got an envelope off the dash. I'd kept it there for a week. Inside was 1 page, the RSSB account number, both kids' full names and dates of birth, the credit union's phone number, the current balance. You can call them anytime, and they'll read you everything on that page, I said. You don't need my permission for anything on it. She held it with both hands. Here's what happened after, and I'll keep it short, because the real story was already over by the time we got to the parking lot. Darren lost Ward 3. The HTA citation ran in the county paper's public records column 2 weeks before the vote. 8-point type between a zoning variance and a property transfer. Pemberton, Darren C., operating a motor vehicle without proof of financial responsibility. In a township of 11,000 people where a man is running on responsibility, that kind of thing doesn't need a headline. He lost with 29%. 2 of his campaign donors pulled out the week after the anniversary dinner. In a municipal race, that's the whole budget. Nobody made a speech about why. In a town this size, nobody has to. Shannon gave up the commercial kitchen space, paid a penalty to get out of the lease, and moved back to a smaller unit 2 doors down from where she'd started. She runs the whole thing herself now. Bookings, ordering, payroll. In February she called me and said Cascade Catering had turned its first real profit. $1,400 for the quarter. She was crying on the phone, and it was the good kind. She and Darren separated in the spring. That's all I'll say about that. I never said one word to my daughter about her marriage before or after, and I'm not going to start now. What happened is that she learned the word no exists in her own vocabulary, and it turned out that in that house, no was load-bearing. Dwight comes fishing with me the first clear Saturday of every month. He brings coffee that tastes like it was made in a machine that hasn't been cleaned since the 90s, and I've stopped mentioning it. We caught 3 walleye in September and argued for 40 minutes about the right way to fillet them, and it was a good afternoon. Gloria and I don't speak. I see her occasionally at the grocery on the main road. We nod, that's the arrangement, and I've made my peace with it. I sold 40% of the business to a young plumber named Travis Hewitt from Barrie, 29 years old, better on a commercial job than I was at 35. He runs the bigger contracts now. I take the calls I want and go fishing on Saturdays, which I had not done since Marion. The rest crossed $51,000 in March. I still put in $900 on the first of every month. I haven't told anyone that number except Stan and Lionel, and now you. Canadian Thanksgiving came around again. I went to the shop in the morning. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect a man at the end of a story like this to be transformed. I wasn't, not entirely. It was a long weekend Monday, and I didn't know what else to do with myself. So I unlocked the bay doors and started reorganizing a bin of pipe fittings that didn't need reorganizing. At 11, my phone rang, video call. Emma's face 6 inches from the camera, one eye taking up half the screen. Grandpa Harv, are you coming? Jack put your name on the table and everything. Behind her I could hear Stan's voice saying something, and Jack arguing about a chair. I was 12 minutes away. I made it in 9. 6 of us at Shannon's dining room table. Shannon, Emma, Jack, Stan, Dwight, who'd been invited on his own account for his own reasons, and me. There was a card on my plate. Construction paper, safety scissors, the thick crayons. On the front in block letters, Grandpa Harvey. The V was backwards. Emma told me solemnly that she had helped with the spelling, but let Jack do the actual letters himself, because it was his idea, and you have to let the person whose idea it is do the part that matters. Nobody took a photo. At one point, Shannon reached for her phone, and then set it face down on the sideboard and said, "Let's just eat." My seat wasn't at the head of the table. It was at the end by the kitchen door, closest to the counter, where you can get up and refill everybody's water without making anyone move their chair. Marion used to sit there. I sat there for 22 years watching her do it, the seat nobody particularly wants. But there was a card on it with my name on it, and the name was right more or less, with a backwards V and a smear in the corner where Jack's hand had slipped on the crayon. I've thought a lot about the difference between that table and the Thanksgiving photo. It isn't the setting, or how many people, or whether the napkins match. It's that someone counted, and when they counted, I was in the number. Here's what I know now at 57 that I didn't know at 53. You're allowed to love people through money when you don't have the right words. Marion had the words. I never did. The checks were my language, and for a long time that was enough. But you are also allowed to stop. And when you stop, the people who were showing up for the money will tell you very clearly what you were to them. The ones who were showing up for you will cut a card out of construction paper and write your name on it in crayon and put it on a chair before you walk in the door. And the V might be backwards. That's how you know it's real.